Tomorrow, Shabbat, is also the 4th of July. For Americans, the day embodies the deepest of our internal confusions. On this day, we shall celebrate the Declaration of Independence, affirming the equality of all men and the responsibility of government to meet the needs of the people, essentially for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we affirm the right of the people to alter or abolish any government that does not meet those needs and to substitute it with new governments that would. The Declaration was written mostly by Thomas Jefferson, who himself owned hundreds of human beings and enslaved them. When he wrote about slavery in his state of Virginia, he wrote, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just." Yet he owned hundreds of human beings and enslaved them. The contradiction between his words and his actions has been repeated throughout all of American history. When slavery was abolished at the cost of many lives, after a brief period when freedom flourished and racism staggered, slavery was replaced by the KKK terrorism, lynchings, and Jim Crow. When protesters gathered and people risked and lost their lives to make equality real, the black community created new power bases and racism staggered. But Jim Crow was replaced by a system of criminal injustice that began at the point of policemen's guns and culminated in unjust bail, unjust courts, and mass incarceration. It was replaced by massive wipeout of black ownership and personal capital in the Great Recession of 2008, and now with the coronavirus depression of 2020. What was the use of the 4th of July and the Declaration of Independence in all that history? As Frederick Douglass said in an extraordinary speech on July 5th, 1852, what was the 4th of July to a slave? Douglass worked his way through a very long speech to say the following: "Notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I, therefore, live off where I began, with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions. My spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot around in the same old path of its fathers without interference." Notice that the 4th of July still bears witness for him, if it is connected to the obvious tendencies of the present. That is a lesson for us. What can we do? What can we do to draw from the past? How can we make that vision take bodies and action in the present, in ourselves, not elsewhere in the world? Not only is Shabbat this year the 4th of July, but the 4th of July is also Shabbat. How can we honor this confluence of Shabbos in a very Shabbistic way? We can lift up ourselves as Jews and bear the commitment that goes back about 2,500 years. There is an ancient ancestor to the Declaration of Independence. we should add it to the public Torah readings for this Shabbat. We are told, quote, "When you enter the land that your God is giving you, and you possess it and settle in it, you should say, I will set over me a king like all the nations that are around me. You may set, yes, over you a king which God chooses. From among your brothers you may set over you a king. However, you may not place over you a foreign man who is not a brother person to you. Only he is not to multiply horses for himself, and is not to return the people to Egypt in order to multiply horses, since God has said to you, you will never return to that way again. And he is not to multiply wives for himself, that his heart not be turned aside. Nor silver or gold is he to multiply for himself in excess. But it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he is to write himself a copy of this institution in a document before the presence of the Levites and the priests. It is to remain beside him. He is to read it out all the days of his life, in order that he may learn to have awe for his God, to be careful concerning all the words of this institution and the laws he must observe, that his heart not be raised about his brothers, that he not turn aside from what is commanded to the right or to the left, in order that he may prolong his days over his kingdom, he and his sons in the midst of Israel." So I ask myself and you today, what does that warning mean? Your leader, your ruler, shall not return to the narrow land to buy horses. Horse chariots were the great and expensive weapons of the imperial army. Compare them to jet bombers carrying H-bombs. To build up and equip an army meant turning its citizens into slaves in order to foot the bill. But God, who had freed the Israelites even when the horse chariots army pursued them to the edge of the Red Sea, forbade an Israelite king from returning the people to slavery to equip his quasi-imperial army. The passage was a more vivid version of what Martin Luther King said when he called militarism one of the deadly triplets afflicting American society. We, American Jews, are not only heirs to the Torah, we're heirs to the Declaration of Independence too. And facing society-wide racism, we must also face our own. We are not only white. Among us are Jews, black Jews as Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King, as worthy as Anwar Sadat, and as colorful as Gandhi and Liu Xiaobo. We could treat the Declaration of Independence as a prophetic commentary, a haftorah on the Torah portion that we read on the synagogue. So tomorrow, I invite you to join me as I introduce Chazan Jack Kessler, who has done the work of making the heart of the Declaration of Independence into a haftorah, which I will broadcast during our stream services, and feel the exquisite way in which he brings his physical presence, his emotional and spiritual presence as well, and intellectual focus into giving the Declaration of Independence a new life in a very old form. And thereafter, I urge you for this long holiday weekend that the discussions be raised and the questions will be asked about the meaning of the Torah and the Haftorah for our day. Within the community, or does it go beyond it? Is our community one of the inalienable rights? Is there a right to a livable income, livable time to pause and learn in a livable planet? Are we obligated to risk our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor if we face oppression, some things that in our day clearly deface the Declaration of Independence and the values of our cherished Torah. As we ponder these words and we anticipate Shabbat, your way go my blessings for a special holiday, a restful and peaceful Shabbat, and a beautiful summer months ahead. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach.